And of course, this is time shifted, so it's a little sped up here. We're going to be bringing you this this full match.
Davis was on the play. Watery Grave into Island and a Thought Erasure as Calcano had a turn 1 Terramander. See an Opt, a dive down, a second dive down, a Merfolk Mistbinder, and 2 Islands. Mistbinder's going to hit the bin.
Yeah. No surprise here, Andrew Davis on Esper Control. Definitely known for his Azorius control strats, the Terminus-style control decks in Modern.
Merfolk Trickster, rather. Excuse me.
Oh, it's okay.
I got tricked.
Opt here from Christian Calcano, digging for that Curious Obsession, that really powerful effect in his deck.
Have to settle for an attack for 1 with the Terramander as he misses. So Davis went to 19, shocked to 17 for a Godless Shrine, likely leaving up some Absorb or something like that. Calcano just a 3rd land and another attack with a Terramander. So Davis is at 16. Tapped Hallowed Fountains the land for turn.
Yeah, in this scenario, Calcano's not really applying that much pressure to Davis, so it's going to be interesting to see if Calcano can play basically one more threat, how much he wants to overextend into something like Kaya's Wrath, and it's just this really nice dance from both sides. But as far as the Esper Control player side is concerned, this is exactly where you want to be against these mono blue decks.
Yeah, pretty anemic game. It was just Terramander connecting versus Davis making land drops. Calcano tried for a Tempest Djinn. That got absorbed. Now on Davis' side, he's going to deploy a Search for Escanta.
Yeah, Absorb's +3 life is particularly strong here against mono blue aggro. If they're unable to stick a Curious Obsession, your ragtag group of 1-power creatures doesn't do a ton of damage, and a single Absorb can undo, as you can see here, multiple turns of attacking.
And there was an attack with the Terramander. Davis went to 16 briefly before absorbing a Siren Storm Tamer. Follow-up for Calcano was Tempest Djinn. That's getting mortified here. Follow-up, cast down on that Terramander. Now Davis in a pretty solid spot. Calcano deploys a Merfolk Trickster.
Yeah, and he plays this on the main phase in order to give himself the ability to play around counterspells. With his hand of just all protection with dive down and not really enough lands, he's been kind of forced to tap out here, and those dive downs kind of rotting in his hand. You saw Andrew Davis kind of overload him for a turn, and that allowed all of those removal spells from Andrew to kind of dodge all of the protection from Calcano.
Escanta has transformed now. Davis tried for a Karn. That was met by a Wizard's Retort, which was the pickup for Calcano, in addition to his 3 dive downs, the holdings now.
Yeah, that Wizard's Retort, a huge pickup for Calcano. And now with a Terramander, he's got those 3 copies of dive down to protect from any removal spell that Andrew Davis could throw at it.
Yeah, but not from an Absorb.
No, but he found that off of Escanta, I believe, and he doesn't quite have enough mana to do it.
Yeah, that one was just revealed there, not enough mana there, but Kaya's Wrath is going to clean things up, and that's going to put Calcano in a real ugly spot.
Yeah, Kaya's Wrath is pretty solid against these mono blue decks. Things like Dive Down can't protect from it. Siren Storm Tamer, one of your best threats, as well as a means of protection, also does nothing against it.
And now Davis will use Escanta's Sunken Ruin, finds it to Teferi, and Calcano is so far behind. He's seen enough. His players are going to go to game 2. Andrew Davis up 1.
Yeah, and if you want to take a look at both these players' sideboards, you can take a look at the Cardboard Live extension. That is something even on mobile that works. If you look for the puzzle piece on your mobile device, you should be able to bring up both players' deck lists and see exactly what they're going to sideboard. But I'm going to tell you how I think they should sideboard. Let's go over the sideboard from Christian Calcano.
Yeah, so he has 4 Negates, 3 Surge Mare, 2 Deep Freeze, 2 Fairy Duelist, a Disdainful Stroke, an Essence Capture, and 2 Entrancing Melody.
While Fairy Duelist is not a card that should come in this matchup, I do want to point out that I think it is one of the more unique and pretty sweet options that these mono blue aggro decks have picked up over the last few months. As far as what I would bring in this matchup, cards like Disdainful Stroke and Negate are obviously very strong. I think boarding out things like Essence Capture is important because there aren't enough targets for it. Even though the Esper Control decks occasionally have stuff like Leerdom Bringer or even Thief of Sanity after sideboard, you just can't really afford to have that mostly dead card for so long.
Yeah, you got to hope to catch them with your Disdainful Stroke, I suppose, or just beat them before it's a factor. And over on Andrew Davis' side, he's got 4 Thief of Sanity, 2 Duress, a Hostage Taker, a Profane Procession, a Cry of the Carnarium, 2 Lyra Dawmbringers, a Moment of Craving, a Negate, the Eldest Reborn, and an Unmoored Ego.
From this side, the Esper Control deck is going to try to lower the curve fit as much interaction in there as possible, and probably use Thief of Sanity not only as a blocker for an early creature that has flying with Curious Obsession, but also as a means of just creating these extra chump blockers, these extra protection spells for the Thief of Sanity itself, as well as the sideboard negates can come up a pretty big deal if he's able to steal one off of a Thief. As far as the rest of the sideboard is concerned, Duress is pretty good. Hostage Taker, just any way to interact is powerful. And then Profane Possession is one we haven't seen too much of, but that card could likely play a factor here out of the sideboard. Cry of Carnarium, Lyra Dawnbringer, Moment of Craving, Negate. Even the Eldest Reborn, it's not pretty. It's very slow. But any interaction, I think, is good interaction. And if Andrew Davis has enough poor options in his main, you could see those come to play.
Yeah, a lot of potential interaction points. So as we get underway, it looks like Calcano kept a 7 on the play. Davis has taken at least one mulligan here. We'll see if he can come up with a 6 he's happy with. Yeah, a lot of good interaction points, but hitting your land drops is really important, especially in a matchup that's so fast.
Right, and Andrew Davis needs to have basically the better half of his draws to really interact in a positive way. He's going to need to hit those first 3 to 5 land drops, as well as interacting all along the curve.
Yeah, Davis keeps a 6. Calcano starts with Island into Opt. Not the most powerful start, as Davis just plays a tap Godless Shrine. Siren Stormtamer on turn 2 for Calcano. Now we're talking.
I don't know if you saw, Andrew Davis has the one of Island in his hand, along with that Kaya's Wrath. And Calcano here is going off on turn 2.
Yeah,
turn
Stormtamer with 2 Curious Obsessions. That just connects. Davis just making some land drops. Here's a second attack with that very curious Stormtamer. That knocks Davis to 14.
And you'll see, this is why people really like playing the mono blue aggro deck. Here, Calcano is 100% in the driver's seat. This is turn 4. He's played 2 Curious Obsession, has a handful of cards, and he has a 3/3 that whenever it hits his opponent, he gets to draw 2 more cards. And when you back that up with a bunch of things like Negate, Dive Down, it becomes insanely difficult for these Esper control decks to do much of anything.
Yeah, Davis made a 4th land drop, but passed on the Kai's Wrath. He's going to try Cast Down on Calcano's turn. That gets hit by Negate. The Stormtamer connects again. Davis to 11. 2 more cards for Calcano.
Calcano would have loved to have hit a land off of one of these big bursts of card draw here, so he can play multiple protection spells in the right spots. This one of Disdainful Stroke out of the sideboard, though, taking care of that Lyra Dawnbringer, something that could have potentially been a serious problem since it dodges all those negates.
Yeah, huge swing. Another hit from the Stormtamer. This one bumps Davis to 11. Forgot about that Absorb, but 2 more cards for Calcano. Things get a little worse all the time as Surge Mare is added to the battlefield, and Kaya's Wrath is met by Negate.
Yeah, and Surge Mare here can pump up quite a bit if Calcano chooses. It looks right now he can pump it for 6, so he could go for lethal here, and against just Island and Hallowed Fountain, it might be the play.
6th Island there for Calcano. There's an attack with the creatures. Stormtamer connects. Looks like no pumps on the Surge Mare. Draws 2 cards. Davis at 6.
You know things are going well from the mono blue aggro side of things when you choose to discard a Chart of Course on the previous turn and a Curious Obsession on this turn.
Kaya's Wrath met by Wizard's Retort, and that's going to tie things up. These players are going to go to a deciding game 3.
Yeah, the mulligan there really hurting Andrew Davis. Didn't have a point of interaction on his turn 2, Calcano's turn 3. Those 2 copies of Curious Obsession just buried him.
Right. The mono blue aggro deck, it can pull together some scrappy wins, Tempest Djinn being kind of the best individual card in your deck. But the reason you really play the deck, sometimes you get a free win, is exactly games like that, where you can hook up a 1-drop with a Curious Obsession and just go to work.
So a lot of people ask me, hey Todd, what about splashing a color in these mono blue decks? And my response has always been, find me a creature that's better than Tempest Djinn for the 3-drop slot, and you can splash a color all you want. Mm-hmm. One thing that I would love to try, and I don't know if this is actually something worthwhile, but I want to try a deck that plays Thief of Sanity and Dive Down and has an emphasis on protecting its creatures. And I think that there is a chance that Tempest Djinn is actually just worse than Thief of Sanity, and you can splash black for it all day long with your Spell Pierces and your Dive Downs, and your opponent really just having to use their removal early to kill those creatures, the 1- and 2-drop creatures while you're tapped out. You know, a Thief Sand on turn 3 could be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And it might end up being one of the next iterations for this mono blue aggro deck.
Picking up Cast Down and Moment of Craving, also pretty serious options for the 75 as well.
Yeah, and now the sideboard, you could just, against the aggro matchups, you could maybe even have this transformational sideboard plant that becomes removal, Thief of Sanity, and maybe something like even Karn Scion of Urza as a new game plan that doesn't revolve around Curious Obsession against decks that feature Goblin Chain Whirler, for example.
We're going to flip the script for Game 3. Davis is on the play, keeping on 7. Calcano taking a first mulligan here.
Yeah, the mulligans don't hurt the mono blue deck quite as much as the Esper control deck. The mono blue deck can function off a low land count, so card quality, a much bigger issue here for the mono blue aggro deck than card quantity.
Calcano keeps on 6, try to the bottom. Tapped Water Grave for Davis, just an island for Calcano. Isolated Chapel for Davis, no Thought Erasure, as turn 2 play for Calcano is a Surge Mare.
Yeah, and not a huge threat on its own, but a high enough toughness to dodge Cry of the Carnarium as well as Moment of Craving. So a decent threat here on the sideboard and just ups the overall threat density of the mono blue aggro deck.
Carries a Curious Obsession just as well as any of the creatures in a matchup where your opponent's not blocking, though Calcano doesn't have one. Just going to pump the Mare and make an attack. There's a Moment of Craving. Kind of funny, won't kill the creature, but stops Calcano from looting with the Surge Mare.
Yeah, the other part of Surge Mare is if it deals damage to the opponent, it starts at 0 power. So if you use the 2-mana ability to give it a power, you get to loot as well. And with Calcano doing that on turn 3 and having no real follow-up play, his hand can't be very good.
Hostage Taker grabbed the first Surge Mare, Calcano deployed a second, but now Davis is going to take a look at the hand with a Thought Erasure. Tempest Shin, a third Surge Mare. Merfolk Mistbinder and 2 Spell Pierces, or Mistcloak Herald rather. I don't know why I keep saying this card name. It's just not a card in the deck.
It's okay.
Tempest Shin hits the bin though.
Look, whenever a deck pops up on the scene and it uses bad draft commons, it's a forgivable offense.
I string together some words that sound like a draft comment. It just happens to be the wrong thing.
Profane Procession here from Andrew Davis. This could be all she wrote for Christian Calcano. Every activation requires him to have an answer, and with just 2 Spell Pierces in hand, as well as Andrew Davis able to pay for the one that he can cast, is bad news for Mr. Calcano.
Very scary. Davis at 22. The mono blue aggro deck has a tough time dealing damage in high quantities. Tempest Shin really the heaviest hitter and the only copy that Calcano draws in the graveyard.
Right, and Terramander, while a particularly strong upgrade in the 1-drop slot because it can deal a lot of damage on its own, no instant sorceries notably in Calcano's yard right now, so it's not really doing much.
So here comes the Herald and the 2 Surge Mares. Davis going to block Surge Mare on Surge Mare, Hostage Taker on Surge Mare. Calcano will pump twice, trade the Taker for the Surge Mare. Herald connects. Davis still at 19, though, and he's just going to go to work activating Profane Procession. Takes care of that backup Surge Mare. All Calcano can do is attack with the Herald.
Yeah, and just 1 point clock here, not really getting the job done. Andrew Davis can even decide at any point to turn the corner and just start attacking with that Surge Mare and pumping it for 4 power.
Yeah, not really much of a blocker, and really nothing is in the face of Mistcloak Herald, so at some point you might see that, though for now Davis content just to leave up activations of that Procession and go to work that way.
Yeah, and while Calcano did find a dive down, it's not going to be quite enough because Andrew can just, you do it on instep, untap, and do it again.
Yeah, you don't lose any resources, and he's not even going to use Procession on that Herald. Just fires off Mortify. That one's not worth it, he says.
Right. When you hit the 3rd creature with the Procession, it transforms. And he wants to have that around as long as possible. And burning that Mortify there when, he kind of has an abundance of resources at his disposal is a pretty smart play, and one that I don't know if I would have been able to make.
Yeah, and just the way that Profane Procession works, you can actually cast the creatures that you steal with it.
Right.
So you want to try to get some good ones under there.
Yeah.
Davis going to go to work attacking with that Surge Mare. He'll pump twice. Calcano's a 16, a loot, and a discard of the land for Davis. Reasonable draw was Tempest Shin for Calcano, though Davis kind of flush with answers.
Yeah, I mean, he can only activate the Procession once. He has Kaya's Wrath that he could deploy here. And when staring down a 6-point attack from that Tempest Shin, it's probably not the worst idea in the world to just cast that Kaya's Wrath.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting playing with regard to a potential Spell Pierce here, right? You don't want to activate and then cast your Wrath into a Spell Pierce, and he just chooses to do nothing here. He can afford to take a hit from the Tempest Shin. That makes some sense. Calcano will start his turn with an Opt. Davis responds with an activation of the Procession. That'll get hit by the dive down. Squire to the bottom off of the Opt. Is there a Curious Obsession or anything? No, just an attack for 6 from the Tempest Shin. Davis will fall to 11, and Terramander is the follow-up. 2 pretty reasonable creatures, though. There's that 10th land for Davis. Potentially could just wipe away this entire board, and he'll actually do that the easy way. Kaya's Wrath deployed.
Yeah, and he knows the majority of Calcano's hand, knows there's 2 Spell Pierces kind of sitting there. I'm not sure if there are 3 cards in Calcano's hand or not. Even if somehow this Kaya's Wrath does get countered, though, that procession on the battlefield is just a huge threat.
And that Wrath goes through. Davis gains a life because he had a creature there. And here's Karn, Scion of Urza. That'll get negated.
Yeah, that negate was a peel off the top. Would have been a lot better there. As a way to protect against that Kaya's Wrath,